Hello and welcome to my tutorial on teaching our dogs to leave it. Leave it is a preventative cue that asks our dogs not to pick something up. I tend to teach it parallel to a drop. So a drop is once a dog's got something in their mouth to let it go, and leave it is to actually stop them picking it up in the first place. However, some people teach leave it to mean don't pick it up or actually drop it as well, and that's absolutely fine. The key with leave it really is keeping it fun and positive. A lot of people feel the need to bellow the words leave it and use their tone of voice as a way of getting the behaviour out of the dog, and it doesn't really need to be like that. We can teach leave it to mean do something else instead, and the way I like to teach it is don't go and pick that up, look at me instead and maybe move away from it. Key points with leave it is that when you're teaching it, we really want to reduce or try and avoid the dog getting frustrated in the first place. So it's really important when we're training it that we don't end up unintentionally teasing dogs with food. We don't want to see them pulling on the lead too much, or if ideally not at all. And we don't want to see them whining or scratching on the floor to get to the food. That tells us that we've raised our criteria way too soon. Which isn't fair on the dog, and that we need to take a big step back. The other thing that we need to make sure that we do is not let the dog get the food afterwards. So leave it to me means don't pick it up at all. And a lot of people do train leave it where they say leave it, okay, now you can take it. And I don't think that is very clear communication to the dog. Leave it to me means, the way I teach it is when I say leave it, that is, you don't go towards that at all. The other thing to make sure you do is before you start using the word out in real life, that you have trained this in a variety of contexts, and we call it generalization. So you want to make sure that you've taught it in a variety of locations. So that's indoors, outdoors in the garden, out on the street, and also using a variety of food. Start off with really low value food that your dog isn't going to be hugely motivated to go towards, and start to, as your dog understands what leave it is, then you can start to increase the value of the food that you're asking them to leave. So I'm going to use Kanita for my demonstration. She's on a harness. We're starting it indoors. She has done a little bit of this already. And the other thing that we do is use a marker word. So the moment that she looks at me, I'm going to use a marker word to pinpoint that behaviour, and it just helps communicate to her that that behaviour gets you this reinforcer, which is a treat. And the treat that I'm using is much higher value food for her than the one that I'm asking her to leave on the floor. Okay, so here it goes. Right, so she is a bit about sprats. She likes them, but they're not her favourite thing. It's nice and large. Ideally, we tend to do this with two people in our puppy classes, so that one person puts the food down, as throwing the food can sometimes trigger your dog to try and get it, if they have a high chase drive in particular. Kanita doesn't, so I can get away with doing it. What you're going to do is toss the treat as far away as you can. When she looks at me, yes. Use my marker word and give her a treat. Yes. Because she's still looking at me, I'm going to mark and reinforce that behaviour. Good girl. Now I'm going to see about walking a little bit closer towards it. Yes. So she's quite near about the sprat at this distance, so I think I can decrease the distance between her and the sprat. What I'm going to do is, because I'm working on my own, get her to get a treat from behind while I go pick up the sprat. You get to see me in my slippers. Okay, so she's really not particularly bothered about the sprat at that distance, so I'm going to throw it a little bit closer. Yes. That was possibly a bit too close. It was a bit of a rubbish throw, but she's done a bit of foundation work with leave it before. Good girl. So because she's staying focused on me, then I'm going to continue to reinforce that. And then we're going to see about walking a little bit closer to it just a tiny step, yes. And I mark and reinforce her for paying attention to me. So that was pretty easy for her. I'm going to pick up the sprat. So Sprat, she's obviously a bit, really don't care about it. So now I'm going to actually try a bit of higher value food for her. Yes. So the moment she looks at me, I mark and I reinforce. Yes, good girl. So I'm going to take a little step towards it. Yes. And when I'm saying yes, as I get closer to it, I'm also moving away before I reinforce. And the reason I do that is I try and get dogs to practice moving away from something of interest. So that what you don't want is for them to take the treat and then take a lunge at the item on the floor. So it's quite a good idea to practice that moving away from the item as well. So she's doing very well, and I think soon we can actually apply the cue to the behaviour. So we'll just see if we do a little bit more approach. Yes. Good girl. So that was a bit too hard. I've made a little mental note that I pushed her too much because I actually had to apply some tension on the lead. It's not ideal, and what I'm doing is paying her off big time for deciding to come away from the item of food on the floor as well. And that way she'll think, well, why would I want that little piece on the floor when I'm getting 5 pieces here as well? So what I'm going to do is show you how to apply the cue. And ideally, you only apply the cue when you are really confident that your dog is going to do what you are teaching them to do. You don't want to apply the cue when you're not 100% sure you're going to get that behaviour. And I'm going to apply the cue the moment I see her head turning back to me. Leave it. Good girl. Good girl. Very good. That's excellent. Good girl. So she's been really, really good. Like I said, I've done a little bit of foundation work with her. Not too much. Let's see if she'll... Leave it. Good girl. Very good. And then this time I'm going to show you how to apply the cue in a slightly different way. So you would repeat that quite a lot, and as I've said a few times, we've done some foundation work with Kanita, but what you want to initially do is pair up the cue to the action as it happens, and once you've done that quite a few times, they should start to build an association that leave it, the word leave it means look at you, and then you can start to do it as the dog is spotting something for the first time. So just like so. Leave it. Good girl. Very good. That is so clever. Let's go pick up that. Good girl. So you work through that systematically. It's a really good idea to incorporate getting a little bit closer. Just a little word on raising criteria, just one thing at a time. So as you start to get really close to things, it's a good idea to use much lower value food. And also I've lost my train of thought, that if you also incorporate the elements of surprise. So if you could set up a scenario in a room where there's a bit of low value food at one end, and that you walk your dog into the room and then use the word leave it as well, because you know if you're always training them to watch you throw food and then ask them to leave it, that's not really very real life. So it's really important to try and generalize the behavior and make it as proofed as possible, and then eventually you should be able to apply the word out on your street walks, and ask your dog to look at you instead of try and get that chicken wing that's on the floor as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.